For decades, Yolanda Adams has been more than a voice. She has been a constant presence during moments of joy, grief, and spiritual searching for millions of people who leaned on her music when words failed them. That is why, when her family finally stepped forward at 60 to share news that many quietly feared but never wanted to confront, the reaction was immediate and emotional. The announcement did not arrive with dramatic spectacle or sensational language. It came carefully, deliberately, shaped by love and restraint. Yet even in its measured tone, it carried weight. Because when a figure like Yolanda Adams becomes the center of concern rather than comfort, the shift is deeply unsettling for those who have grown accustomed to her strength. For a long time, fans had sensed something was different. Appearances became less frequent, social media posts slowed, interviews felt more reflective than celebratory. None of this was alarming on its own, but together it created a quiet tension. Yolanda Adams had always been open about faith, perseverance, and the importance of rest. Yet she was also known for her tireless work ethic and unwavering presence. When that presence softened, people noticed. Rumors began to circulate, fueled by absence rather than confirmation. Her family, aware of the growing concern, chose silence for as long as they could, not out of secrecy but out of protection. They understood how quickly speculation can spiral, especially when love for someone runs so deep. When the family finally spoke, they did not confirm every fear, but they did acknowledge reality. They shared that this season was one of adjustment, reflection, and careful attention to matters that could no longer be brushed aside. The news was not framed as an ending, but it was undeniably a turning point. They emphasized that Yolanda was surrounded by support, grounded in faith, and deeply aware of the love being poured toward her. Still, the acknowledgement that things had changed was enough to send waves of emotion through her audience. People were forced to reckon with the idea that even the strongest voices must sometimes step back, that even those who carry others eventually need to be carried. What made the family's message so powerful was its honesty. There was no attempt to dramatize the moment, no effort to inspire panic or sympathy. Instead, they spoke of balance, of listening to the body, of honoring seasons. They asked for prayers not out of desperation, but out of trust. Trust that community matters, and that vulnerability does not diminish strength. For many listeners, this reframing was comforting, yet still heavy. Yolanda Adams had long been associated with resilience, with rising above hardship through faith and song. Seeing her enter a season that required stillness challenged the image people held of her, forcing them to see her not just as a symbol, but as a human being. The reaction from fans was immediate and heartfelt. Messages poured in from people who credited her music with helping them survive loss, illness, and uncertainty. They spoke of songs that carried them through hospital rooms, funeral services, and moments of personal doubt. Now, those same people found themselves offering support back to the woman who once supported them. It was a full-circle moment, one that revealed how deeply interconnected her life and work had become with the lives of others. This was not just concern for a celebrity. It was concern for someone who felt like family to millions. The family also addressed the difficulty of navigating public concern while maintaining private boundaries. They acknowledged that curiosity often comes from care, but they asked for patience and respect. Not every detail, they explained, belongs to the public, even when the person involved has lived much of their life in the spotlight. This boundary setting was gentle but firm, reminding audiences that love does not require full access. In a world accustomed to constant updates and transparency, this request felt both necessary and challenging. Fans wanted reassurance, clarity, and certainty. The family could offer presence and honesty, but not control over outcomes. This moment also prompted reflection about legacy. At 60, Yolanda Adams has already accomplished more than many artists do in a lifetime. Awards, accolades, and chart success tell only part of that story. Her true legacy lives in the emotional and spiritual imprint she left on people across generations. The family's announcement did not diminish that legacy. If anything, it deepened it. It reminded listeners that impact is not measured by constant output, but by lasting connection. Even in a season of quiet, her influence remained loud. For some, the news triggered fear. Fear of loss, fear of finality, fear of imagining a world without her voice as a steady anchor. The family did not dismiss these fears. They acknowledged them while gently redirecting focus toward hope and presence. They emphasized that this was a time to appreciate, to reflect, and to remain grounded rather than assume the worst. This balance between realism and reassurance shaped the tone of their message, preventing it from becoming either alarmist or dismissive. As the story spread, it became clear that this was not about a single announcement. It was about confronting the reality that even those who seem invincible are subject to seasons of vulnerability. Yolanda Adams had spent her career encouraging others to trust God through uncertainty. Now, her life was inviting that same trust from those who admired her. The family's words did not close a chapter. They opened a quieter one marked by care, faith, and collective support. By sharing this news, the family shifted the narrative from speculation to honesty, from fear to presence. They reminded everyone listening that love is not passive. It shows up in prayer, in patience, and in respect for boundaries. Whatever this season holds, one thing is certain: Yolanda Adams is not facing it alone. And for the first time, the audience that once depended on her voice is learning how to offer their own in return. As the initial shock settled, a deeper emotional response began to take shape among those who had followed Yolanda Adams for decades. This was not the kind of news people could process quickly. It required sitting with uncertainty, something her music had often helped others do, but now felt personal in a new way. Many fans spoke about how her songs were woven into the fabric of their lives, played during moments of prayer, celebration, and grief. Hearing that her family was asking for understanding and space forced people to reverse roles emotionally. The giver of comfort now needed care, and that reversal stirred something tender and unfamiliar. It reminded listeners that the people we lean on most are often the ones who carry the heaviest unseen burdens. In conversations sparked by the family's message, people began reflecting on how often strength is misunderstood. Yolanda Adams had long embodied strength in public imagination, strength of voice, of faith, of perseverance. Yet the family's words quietly challenged the idea that strength means constant visibility or endless output. Instead, they reframed strength as discernment, the wisdom to pause before harm deepens. This reframing resonated deeply, especially with those who had pushed themselves too hard in their own lives, believing rest was a luxury rather than a necessity. Seeing someone they admired choose care over performance gave permission many did not realize they needed. The announcement also opened broader discussions about aging in the public eye. At 60, Yolanda Adams occupies a space where experience and expectation collide. Audiences often want their icons to remain unchanged, frozen in the roles that first inspired them. But time moves forward regardless of public desire. The family's message gently reminded everyone that growth includes seasons of slowing down. That reality does not erase past contributions, nor does it signal weakness. It simply reflects the natural rhythm of life. For many fans, accepting this required letting go of an image they had held tightly for years. Messages of support continued to pour in, not just from fans, but from fellow artists, pastors, and public figures who understood the cost of long-term visibility. While details remained private, the collective response revealed a shared understanding of how demanding public life can be, especially when faith communities project expectations of constant availability. The family's decision to speak when they did appeared rooted in care, not urgency. They wanted to address concern without feeding speculation, to acknowledge reality without surrendering privacy. That balance is difficult to maintain, and their measured tone reflected a deliberate effort to protect Yolanda's well-being above all else. For many listeners, the news triggered personal memories tied to her music. People recalled specific songs that carried them through illness, heartbreak, or moments of doubt. Those memories resurface now with renewed intensity. Fans shared stories of listening to her voice in hospital rooms, during long drives, or in moments when faith felt fragile. This collective remembering transformed the news into something communal. It was no longer just about Yolanda Adams. It was about the shared experiences her music had facilitated. In that sense, the family's announcement became a catalyst for gratitude as much as concern. There was also an undercurrent of grief. Not necessarily for a loss that had occurred, but for the possibility of change. Change, even when necessary, can feel like loss. The idea that Yolanda might not appear in the same ways, at the same pace, unsettled those who found comfort in her consistency. The family did not dismiss this feeling. By acknowledging adjustment rather than finality, they allowed space for both hope and sadness to coexist. This emotional honesty prevented the conversation from tipping into either denial or despair. Some fans struggled with boundaries, wanting more information to ease their anxiety. The family's request for patience challenged a culture accustomed to immediate access, yet many came to understand that love does not require constant updates. In fact, respecting boundaries can be a deeper expression of care. This realization shifted how people engaged with the situation. Instead of demanding clarity, they focused on sending encouragement, prayers, and messages of appreciation. The tone of the conversation softened, becoming less about fear and more about presence. This moment also prompted reflection on the way society treats public figures during vulnerable seasons. Too often, concern turns into consumption, and private challenges become public spectacle. The family's careful communication resisted that pattern. By sharing only what was necessary, they modeled a different approach, one that values dignity over disclosure. This approach resonated with many who are weary of oversharing culture, especially when it comes to health and personal struggles. It reminded people that compassion does not require complete transparency. As discussions continued, some listeners began re-examining Yolanda Adams' past messages through a new lens. Her emphasis on faith, rest, and trusting God through uncertainty took on fresh meaning. Lyrics that once felt encouraging now felt prophetic, not in a dramatic sense, but in their quiet wisdom. It became clear that her music had always pointed toward balance, even if audiences were more focused on its power than its gentleness. This realization deepened appreciation for her artistry, revealing layers that might have been overlooked before. The family's announcement also sparked conversations about how faith communities support their leaders. Many people recognize that those who minister often do so at great personal cost. They carry others' pain while suppressing their own. This moment invited a collective pause to consider how that dynamic can change. How can communities create space for leaders to rest without guilt? How can admiration coexist with realistic expectations? These questions lingered, challenging long-held assumptions about service and sacrifice. By the end of this phase, the narrative had shifted from fear to reflection. The news everyone feared had become an invitation to slow down, to appreciate and to listen more carefully. Yolanda Adams' family had not offered answers to every question, but they had offered something perhaps more valuable: perspective. A reminder that life moves in seasons, that care sometimes requires quiet, and that love is not diminished by change. As people sat with this understanding, the collective response matured, becoming less reactive and more reverent. Some fans struggled with boundaries, wanting more information to ease their anxiety. The family's request for patience challenged a culture accustomed to immediate access, yet many came to understand that love does not require constant updates. In fact, respecting boundaries can be a deeper expression of care. This realization shifted how people engaged with the situation. Instead of demanding clarity, they focused on sending encouragement, prayers, and messages of appreciation. The tone of the conversation softened, becoming less about fear and more about presence. This moment also prompted reflection on the way society treats public figures during vulnerable seasons. Too often, concern turns into consumption, and private challenges become public spectacle. The family's careful communication resisted that pattern. By sharing only what was necessary, they modeled a different approach, one that values dignity over disclosure. This approach resonated with many who are weary of oversharing culture, especially when it comes to health and personal struggles. It reminded people that compassion does not require complete transparency. As discussions continued, some listeners began re-examining Yolanda Adams' past messages through a new lens. Her emphasis on faith, rest, and trusting God through uncertainty took on fresh meaning. Lyrics that once felt encouraging now felt prophetic, not in a dramatic sense, but in their quiet wisdom. It became clear that her music had always pointed toward balance, even if audiences were more focused on its power than its gentleness. This realization deepened appreciation for her artistry, revealing layers that might have been overlooked before. The family's announcement also sparked conversations about how faith communities support their leaders. Many people recognize that those who minister often do so at great personal cost. They carry others' pain while suppressing their own. This moment invited a collective pause to consider how that dynamic can change. How can communities create space for leaders to rest without guilt? How can admiration coexist with realistic expectations? These questions lingered, challenging long-held assumptions about service and sacrifice. By the end of this phase, the narrative had shifted from fear to reflection. The news everyone feared had become an invitation to slow down, to appreciate and to listen more carefully. Yolanda Adams' family had not offered answers to every question, but they had offered something perhaps more valuable: perspective. A reminder that life moves in seasons, that care sometimes requires quiet, and that love is not diminished by change. As people sat with this understanding, the collective response matured, becoming less reactive and more reverent. There was also a quiet reckoning with fear: fear of mortality, fear of loss, fear of change. Yolanda Adams' music had often provided language for these fears, helping people face them with faith. Now, her life was prompting that confrontation in a new way. Fans were forced to sit with uncertainty rather than escape it through song. The family did not offer reassurance through specifics. Instead, they offered reassurance through posture, emphasizing trust, support, and patience. That approach required listeners to engage their own faith rather than rely solely on hers. As conversations continued, many people began revisiting her legacy with fresh eyes. They spoke not only of her vocal power, but of her consistency and message. Themes of endurance, surrender, and hope threaded through her work long before this moment. Now, those themes felt less abstract and more embodied. Her life was reflecting the same truths she had sung about for years. This alignment between message and reality deepened respect for her artistry. It revealed that her influence was not confined to sound but extended into lived example. The family's handling of the situation also became a point of discussion. Their calm, measured communication stood in contrast to the panic-driven narratives often seen when public figures face challenges. By refusing to overshare, they maintained control over the story without shutting people out completely. This balance was instructive. It demonstrated that transparency does not require total exposure, and that boundaries can coexist with honesty. Many fans expressed appreciation for this approach, recognizing it as an act of care rather than secrecy. Another important shift occurred as people began examining their own responses. Some noticed an initial impulse to seek reassurance for themselves rather than focusing on Yolanda's well-being. That realization sparked humility. It reminded them that concern can sometimes be self-centered, driven by fear of losing comfort rather than empathy for someone else's experience. The family's message gently redirected that impulse, encouraging support without demand. This redirection changed the tone of engagement, making it less about consumption and more about compassion. In faith communities, pastors and leaders reference the situation as a teaching moment. They spoke about honoring seasons of rest, about recognizing when someone needs support rather than expectation. Yolanda Adams' life became an illustration of a principle often preached but rarely practiced, that strength includes knowing when to step back. These conversations suggested that her impact was still unfolding, not through new performances, but through the way her current season was shaping understanding. The announcement also prompted reflection on gratitude. Many fans realized they had never fully articulated how much her music meant to them. In response, they began sharing stories, letters, and messages of thanks. These expressions were not pleas for her return to the spotlight, but acknowledgments of what she had already given. This shift from expectation to appreciation marked a significant emotional turn. It allowed people to honor her contributions without attaching conditions to their support. As this stage of the narrative settled, it became clear that the fear people felt was intertwined with love. Fear of losing a voice that had guided them. Fear of facing uncertainty without that familiar anchor. The family's message did not erase that fear, but it reframed it. Instead of something to avoid, fear became something to sit with, guided by faith rather than panic. This reframing aligned closely with the themes Yolanda Adams had long championed, trusting God in seasons that do not come with clear answers. By now, the story was no longer just about news everyone feared. It was about a community learning to respond differently, learning to wait, learning to support without controlling, learning to honor a person beyond their output. Yolanda Adams' influence was shaping behavior even in her quietness, teaching lessons through absence as powerfully as she once did through presence. This section of the journey revealed something enduring. When someone's impact is rooted in authenticity, it does not fade when circumstances change. It adapts. The family's announcement did not weaken Yolanda Adams' legacy. It strengthened it by revealing its depth. As people continued to process, one truth became increasingly clear. Whatever the future holds, her voice has already done its work. And now, in this season, the response of those who love her is becoming part of that work as well. As the final stretch of this story unfolds, what remains most striking is how quietly everything has changed. There was no single dramatic moment, no definitive statement that closed the chapter. Instead, there was a collective slowing, a shared exhale as people adjusted their expectations and learned to live with uncertainty. In many ways, this is the hardest kind of moment to navigate. There is no clear resolution to anticipate, no obvious action to take. There is only presence. The family's message invited exactly that: presence without pressure, support without demands, love without conditions. For an audience accustomed to constant updates and decisive narratives, this invitation required maturity. Many fans began to recognize that their fear was less about losing Yolanda Adams and more about confronting impermanence itself. Her music had been a constant through shifting seasons of life. It felt permanent, reliable, always there when needed. The realization that even constants can change unsettled people deeply. Yet this discomfort also opened space for growth. It encouraged listeners to internalize the strength her music had always pointed them toward, rather than relying solely on her voice to access it. In that sense, this season became an extension of her ministry, guiding people toward resilience rather than dependency. The family's insistence on faith over fear played a central role in this transformation. They did not promise outcomes. They did not speculate publicly. Instead, they modeled trust, a quiet confidence that whatever unfolded would be met with care and grounding. This posture influenced how people responded. Conversations became less frantic and more thoughtful. Prayer requests shifted from desperate pleas to expressions of gratitude and hope. This evolution revealed something powerful about community. When guided well, it can rise to the level of the moment rather than collapse under it. Another important realization emerged during this time. Legacy is not static. It is not locked in by past achievements alone. It continues to grow through how a person's life influences others, even in moments of vulnerability. Yolanda Adams' legacy was expanding in real time, not through new releases or appearances, but through the way her current season was shaping collective understanding. People were learning to honor rest, to respect boundaries, and to value people beyond what they produce. These lessons, though quieter than music, carried lasting impact. The family's role in this process cannot be overstated. Their decision to speak with restraint rather than urgency protected not only Yolanda's privacy, but the integrity of the moment. They resisted the temptation to manage public emotion through constant reassurance. Instead, they trusted the community to hold complexity. This trust was not misplaced. Over time, people demonstrated patience, empathy, and respect. This response challenged the assumption that audiences always demand access. Sometimes, when invited into honesty without spectacle, they respond with grace. This season also prompted a broader conversation about how society supports those who have given so much. Too often, admiration turns into entitlement. People forget that public figures do not exist solely to serve emotional needs. Yolanda Adams' situation reminded many that appreciation must include care. That care sometimes means stepping back, allowing space, and accepting change without resentment. These realizations marked a shift from consumption to connection, from expectation to empathy. As the story settled, people began asking a quieter but more meaningful question. How can we honor what has been given without demanding more? This question reframed everything. It allowed fans to celebrate Yolanda Adams' contributions fully, without attaching conditions to their support. It encouraged gratitude unburdened by fear. In this reframing, love became less anxious and more generous. The uncertainty remains. The family never promised clarity, and that was intentional. Life rarely offers neat conclusions, especially in moments that matter deeply. But uncertainty does not negate meaning. It often deepens it. By refusing to rush this moment, the family preserved its significance. They allowed it to unfold organically, shaped by reflection rather than reaction. This patience became part of the story itself. For many, this season has become a mirror. It reflects how people handle vulnerability, how they respond when strength looks different than expected, and how they practice faith when answers are not immediate. Yolanda Adams' life has always pointed toward trusting God beyond circumstances. Now, her audience is being invited to live that message rather than just listen to it. That invitation is both challenging and transformative. In the end, the news everyone feared did not arrive as catastrophe. It arrived as an awakening to the reality that even the most powerful voices need rest. That influence does not disappear in quiet seasons. That love does not require constant proof. The family's message reminded everyone that honoring someone sometimes means letting them step back without guilt or speculation. Whatever the future holds, one truth is already clear. Yolanda Adams' impact is not confined to what she does next. It lives in what she has already given and in what this moment is teaching those who care about her. Her voice may be quieter right now, but its echo remains strong, guiding people toward patience, faith, and compassion. And in that echo, her legacy continues, not as something to fear losing, but as something already deeply and permanently received.